up local officers so they can get there on the ground and continue to help. We also know authorities have welcomed a further reduction in the number of people unaccounted for. It is now 51. There are a number of people located. We're told they are safe, which is outstanding news given that there are so many people still missing. Another piece of information for you this afternoon. Motorists in the southeast are being urged to avoid driving as the number of roads cut by these floodwaters continues to rise. Of course, those waters are heading south into New South Wales as well, and residents of the towns of Bogabilla and Toowoomba are in the flood path as we go to air, so please take note of that.
What did you think about with all this flood?
Of course, that's west of Brisbane have been told to avoid the water after a bull shark was apparently spotted. That does sound strange, but that is what we are being told in the newsroom. Okay, Chinchilla residents are being told to boil their drinking water, as we just mentioned before, after traces of E. coli was found. Dr. Steve Hambleton joins us now from Brisbane with more on that. Doctor, thank you for your time. I understand this health warning was issued not that long ago. How serious exactly is it?
Go back to Bree.
Andrew, could you hold on to this camera and just point it at the television?
Water quality, and that's why we treat the water to make sure that there's no contamination in the water. In some areas, and particularly in northern and western parts of Queensland, our treatment plants have been overwhelmed, and so that's a standard measure. What it means is they need to boil the water, and that'll clear that E. coli contamination. But it is important for residents to realise that they can't drink the water until they're given the all clear, and this is one of the measures.
Okay, so this is Chinchilla that this new development has happened. Take us through the current situation for drinking supplies in Brisbane.
Well, in Brisbane, fortunately, there hasn't been any failures at the moment. It's safe to keep drinking the water in Brisbane, but there has been a big ask to make sure we conserve water.
Right,
it seems very unusual when there's water all around us and our dams are very full.
Are you
but we want to
able
make
to
sure
go
we don't
home or not?
overwhelm our treatment plants in Brisbane and have clean, fresh water available, which is a key need for the community as the flood progresses.
Triggering that warning is the fact that we've heard stories that people are filling up their bathtubs, filling up as many bottles as they can find and instead of conserving the water, and the panic buying that we're also seeing coupled with that. So the message that you're trying to get across is conserve your water.
Well, that's right. The water supply is intact and it is clean and it's available, and we want to make sure we use it for drinking. We want to make sure that as the next few days progresses, and we know that we may have trouble with some of our plants, that the water in the pipes is available and ready, and that's one of the key health outcomes that we need to make sure we continue to maintain.
What are the chances, do you think, as I said, the E. coli has been discovered in Chinchilla, or what are the chances of something like that happening in the city of Brisbane?
Look, it's certainly possible. It's one of the things that happens in floods with the rising waters is that there is the potential contamination of water supply. Now, our supply comes from an area that's not heavily populated. It's areas where there are treatment plants upstream from where water is drawn that the main concerns occur. And so Brisbane's fairly well off in that sense, and we draw our water from areas where there's very low population bases. But this is a measure of fecal contamination of the water, and so we've got to make sure that those levels are tested and maintained. And we have been asked to conserve water in Brisbane to make sure we keep it for drinking.
So boiled water, obviously. Just take people through the dangers. I mean, what does it actually mean for people if E. coli is found in the water, the drinking system?
Well, once again, it's a measure of contamination of the water supply. And thankfully, in Australia, we don't have serious diseases that we do see overseas, like cholera and typhoid. But there are diseases that you can get, and the diarrheal illnesses are the most commonly ones that come from water supply that's contaminated.
Ralph needs like a generator or something like that at the place.
Cholera levels is actually what the scientists use to tell us how much contamination there's been. So provided those levels are maintained at a minimum, we can be confident that our water supply is safe. The other problem with flooding is that people walking through water, cleaning up afterwards, cuts and scratches, and there's going to be contaminated water on the ground. We need clean water to actually wash those with. All of our hospitals in Brisbane and in fact in Australia treat our tap water as though it's sterile, and it virtually is sterile. When the surgeon washes his hands, he actually uses the tap water. So it's very, very important that we actually maintain the quality of that water. Our supplies are full at the moment, and as they're drawn down over the next few days, we hope that the plants can come back online and we can keep producing clean water in our third largest capital city.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve Humbleton, AMA Vice President. We do appreciate you joining us this afternoon. The big message, of course, we need to get across is please conserve your water. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we saw those live chopper shots before and they were incredible, and you'll see why when we show you this model as well. Part of course, the effort from emergency services is relating to generating certain models, and those models will then tell us how we can assess how far the water will actually rise, where these particular pockets of focus should be. Now, one of those models is on your screen at the moment. This is the animation of what might happen in Brisbane, the Brisbane River, if a 3.5 metre flood scenario was to take place. Well, we know it's going to go much higher than that. Compare it to, as we move up the CBD, to the 7 metre extreme flood. Now, all this water, of course, coming from the west, that is what you're seeing on your screen, the 7 metre extreme flood, and we just don't want it to get to those levels. Already we're being told 5.5 is the peak, but you can see the damage that is going to be caused by those flood levels. Already bad at the 3.5 metre mark, and now the sea at 5.5 tomorrow at 5 a.m. It is not going to be good, and already, as I said, those pictures, those incredible pictures from the chopper, you can really see that model. That's what we're seeing now, which really is incredibly frightening, and we're now getting a clearer picture as well of these nightmare floods, not only from the models, the live chopper shots, but we can see what it's done on your screen right now to the town of Grantham. Of course, that town is west of Brisbane. You can see from these pictures just into our newsroom that it is not a pretty sight at all. There are already been 4 deaths confirmed in this area. Dozens of others are still missing from this town, and the damage around this tiny town represents, it looks like a war zone, doesn't it? There's really no other way to describe it. You've got cars overturned, you've got trees down, you've got parts of homes just torn away and moved, down the street, which is just incredible. Now, someone who knows about this firsthand is our reporter Cameron Price. He's actually been in Grantham. Cam, good afternoon to you. This really is, and you can tell from those pictures why, it really is a community that's absolutely shell-shocked today.
Good afternoon, Wendy. Yes, Grantham is the epicentre of this tragedy that has happened from this weather event over the weekend. This flash flood that came down the hill, and you can see from those pictures, and we're only just today seeing it in the light of day, has absolutely wiped out the town. There are homes there that have been taken 100, 200, 300 metres, in many cases with people sitting on the roof and smashed into other homes, smashed into trees. Many of them are flattened. Many of them have collapsed after the foundations were taken out from underneath them. And this isn't just a handful of homes. We've been around this town of some 500 people, and they are in every street, every second or third home.
Cam, the last wire that I saw very recently on my computer was distressing, to say the least. Of course, we know 12 people have been confirmed dead in these floods. The wire that I read said there could be 30 people in Grantham alone that have perished because of the ferocity of the floodwaters through that town. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, we've been in the Helidon Evacuation Centre, which is where all the Grantham residents have gone to. There are plenty of rumours going around that Helidon Evacuation Centre, and they're not rumours because this is a small town. These people know their neighbours, they know their friends, they know their family, they know how many people are missing. I've heard anything from 15, 20 to even one man who is saying that he thinks there are 30 people that are missing, that aren't accounted for, and that obviously at this stage won't be rescued. These are speculative numbers, but there are people who are on the ground there who know the town who are saying that Grantham will be the scene of 30 deaths.
Unbelievable stuff. How are the locals even beginning to comprehend, first of all, that news that we could see in the future that there are 30 deaths alone in that town, but also the fact, the confirmed deaths, 2 more people discovered dead today in the surrounding Lockyer Valley.
Yeah, well, police spent the day going from house to house to house, checking everywhere, not for survivors but for bodies. And I'm hearing things about police walking to a house across a farm field and they found a body there. Things about police were just looking into a creek bed to see if they could get across, another body there. The residents that you ask about are all in the Helidon Evacuation Centre. Well, they were overnight. Today they tried to get east to Gatton, or if they could west to friends and family in Toowoomba, but the people that are there, the grief is really starting to show through. They know so many people who are not there with them. They know that they are likely not coming to the evacuation centre. They know they are likely dead, and these aren't just neighbours, these are people that are friends, these are family. There is a lot of tears, there is a lot of emotion, and at this stage there is starting to grow some anger in that community about why they weren't warned, why there wasn't more help, and obviously at this stage it's understandable that part of grief is turned to anger.
There's still about 50 people missing that we're being told about it, and we hear the figure that 9 are really feared. There are fears, grave fears, that the word's being used for about 9. I would make the assumption that 9 are in that area that we're talking about now, and especially given that, as you just said, residents are describing thinking they're seeing people swimming in floodwaters, and then they're discovering a body, which you cannot even begin to imagine what that's like. That sentence alone is a horrific thing to think about.
Yeah, well, the numbers of the death toll has really been hard to gauge because police simply haven't been able to get into Grantham until late this morning. The water was still up. It was too dangerous for them to get through on road, and it's only today that they've been going from house to house that they're really getting an idea of the death toll. But when you see the pictures, when you see Grantham on the ground and these homes that are collapsed, and when you hear about the stories that these people had just minutes to get out, you can't help but fear that the number is far higher than what we're hearing at the moment.
Just talk us through the damage that we are seeing in Grantham.
Well, when you drive into town, it's and I'm not sure if you saw the story from the other night that where the people were being taken out on the front loader. That area is the hardest hit, and that is where there are houses which probably in a street of 5, 4 are demolished. The 5th has walls missing and probably part of the house next door embedded in its front patio. And then there's things like the pub, and there's bricks from the pub that are half a kilometre away. This entire wall from the Grantham pub that's lodged on a tree some 500 metres up the road, and a 12-tonne heavy machinery that's been just thrown like a matchbox car down the road a few hundred metres. It's hard to fathom the force of the water that was required to do something like that to this town.
Cam, you've been heavily involved in reporting the search and rescue and the original floods in Grantham. You're now a bit further away. You're in Toowoomba at the moment. What's the damage like there?
Bad.
Toowoomba is bad in small areas. I mean, the area behind me, I just walked up and said to the crew that's been here, wow, that looks terrible, because this was really where the water began. This is where the West Creek flew over,
it could be
and
anywhere.
that was the water that ended up
You
in
don't know
Grantham.
where it's gone.
And really here is the surprise element
He's
that's taking place.
us.
The same as Grantham. But Grantham is really the one that I've seen the most destruction out of any of these floods. The locals are saying to us, you know, we've seen the floods in Brisbane, we've seen the floods in Rockhampton where the water rises up over a matter of days. This was a wall of water, an 8-metre wall of water that came to our places in a matter of minutes. We just didn't have time. And not only that, but once they were out, once they were in the evacuation centre, the water took less than a day to pretty much virtually completely recede. So they don't like you calling it a flood. They're calling it a tidal wave or an inland tsunami, because really that's what it was.
Yeah, exactly. Look, I'm unaware of how long you've been in Toowoomba, given you've been covering the disaster in Grantham. Have you had a chance to speak to the locals there? Obviously, they're a stoic bunch, and I know that firsthand.
A tsunami only happens after an earthquake.
Yeah, locals in Grantham are doing it tough. I'm not sure if you're talking about locals in Toowoomba or locals
in local in Toowoomba. Have you had a chance to speak to people in Toowoomba? And then, yeah, please tell me if you've had a chance to speak to people in Grantham as well.
Yeah, in Timberland
and
not so
somewhere
much,
else,
but
he said
this
there was
town
another
seems to be
earthquake.
getting back to normal. There are a few
6.3.
roads that are cut, but everyone is going around, going about their business. They've just been and put fences up around this West Creek area, which is really terribly devastated. As for Grantham, well, they're all in the Helidon Evacuation Centre, which is a few kilometres up the road, in varying stages of grief, and really it's been a tough few days because that Helidon hall that they've been staying in is quite a small hall. They had 180 people in there. They only had about 50 mattresses, so you can imagine people sleeping on chairs, people sleeping on mats, and they had a lot of pets there as well, so there were dogs in the area. Today, they started moving those people out when that road opened to Gatton and to Toowoomba. They started moving those people out to try and stay with family and friends, so there's probably only about 50 left, but those 50, they've lost everything, but they're the lucky ones. They're all saying, we're alive, that's the main thing.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, Cameron Price there reporting from Toowoomba on the situation in Toowoomba and of course Grantham, and things really aren't looking good, particularly in Grantham. Okay, authorities have now confirmed that roads in 35 Brisbane suburbs are currently underwater. The Brisbane City Council is warning residents that roads in the following suburbs we're about to show you could be closed for the next few days. Let's have a look at some of those areas on your screen. You've got Albion, Ascot, Auchenflower, you've got Brisbane City, you've got Brookfield, places like East Brisbane, Fairfield, Fig Tree Pocket, Jindalee, you've got Manly, Milton, and we saw the shots of Milton before, Moorooka, you've got Morningside, New Farm, Newstead, Nunda, Oxley, places like Rockley, Sherwood, South Brisbane, Toowong, West End, West Lake, places like Windsor, Woolloongabba and Yeronga. And again, we saw vision of Yeronga before. They're partially underwater right now this afternoon. Now, we do need people to help out, and if you'd like to donate to the Flood Relief Fund, please call this number. You can see 1800 219 028, or you've got the website there on your screen. Please jot it down. Jump on the internet and help with the flood relief.
I got it recorded.
That would be greatly appreciated. Okay, stay with us here on 9. Lots coming up after the break. We'll have more on the floods crisis unfolding right across Queensland. Please stay with us.
Yeah, that'd be right. Right.